Hey guys, today's another Friday and we're discussing the next episode of The Bad Batch, War Mantle. This is episode 14, which means we're only 2 episodes away from the season finale. Now, if you guys didn't get the chance to check out my previous reviews, I'll drop the links below in the video description so you could see episode by episode what was my reaction to this show. Before we get started, very quickly, my name is Ben. I do Star Wars books and comic book reviews, character highlights, lore videos, and so forth. I would really appreciate your support if you hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and so forth. Now, before we start discussing this particular episode, spoiler alert. Please move away now, guys. If you haven't checked out this episode, don't watch this video. Go see it, come back, and then maybe you'll drop a comment and see what my impression of it was. Once again, this is full-on spoiler alert. Let's jump into it. So where do we start with this show? We are with a completely new planet and a brand new clone character on unknown planet. We start in this forest and he's running away and he's hunted by Imperial recruits, which kind of from the beginning you get a sense that they're not the original clones, as Admiral Rampart has been introducing more and more of the actual recruits into the Imperial Army. Right away, this episode absolutely captivated me with stunning visuals, and I've been saying this throughout the show. When we go to Nar Shaddaa, we have these beautiful, very interesting play of lights and the dark shadows and highlights and the neon lights and so forth. And each episode had something interesting and different to bring, whether it's like an exotic vista or a city skyline, something like that. Here, we're like in this verdant forest, and it just looks so beautiful and honestly quite photorealistic. Which is not exactly what we're looking for in an animated show, but it just brought that gravitas to the show overall and made it more realistic and believable, even against those clearly animated character models and their movements and animations. Then we cut away to Kamino, and we're back to Admiral Rampart, and he's basically shutting down the last operations of the clone facility, and it looks like the last traces of the Republic and the clone army are being erased. Lama Su, the Kaminoan Prime Minister, and Nala says that scientists, they sense the danger as they have been in the previous episodes, and now they're preparing to evacuate. They know that the Empire will show no quarter, they're not interested in this project anymore, and they will dispose of all the witnesses, all the people who could potentially come back and reproduce this experiment. Visually also, Kamino looks much darker. You know, when we see it in the Clone Wars show and in the prequel movies, there's always this sterile white light everywhere. It's too bright. It feels like this clinical, almost like operating room in a hospital. Now things are very dark. It almost feels like even on the technological levels, things are shutting down, you know, department by department, you know, building by building, and, you know, Kamino will be no more very shortly. And the show is visually signaling that. And I honestly felt very upset. I'm like, oh man, this one huge part of Star Wars that we all love and remember, the Kamino, is going down, you know, and the Empire will have none of it anymore. And what other visual cue that I found quite striking and honestly a little bit of heartbreaking, we see the scientist, Lama says, she's leading these young clone cadets that we saw in a Clone Wars show. They obviously look like young Boba Fett, and she's leading them away, and they're asking all these questions. Oh, you know, what's going to happen to us next? Are we still going to remain soldiers? Because that's what they have been bred for. They have been born and bred and disciplined to follow orders. And that's what these young children want to do. And I could not have mistaken that very deliberate orange uniform that they wear, which almost feels like it's a contrast of change of powers, where the actual Empire is taking over. But these young cadets almost look like those orange uniforms we see in Rebel pilots in Episode 4. And you hope that's what Luke wears when he's out there to go and fight the first Death Star. And I couldn't have mistaken that. I felt that it was very deliberate artistically, and say that these last remaining clones will actually flip, and how whatever the amount of them will be left or scattered around the galaxy, they will actually join up with the future rebellion, just like Rex and his team has in the Star Wars Rebels show. Now we're back to our the Bad Batch team, and Rex is asking for help. He says, look, I have this friend. I need him. We don't know exactly at this point why Rex needs to recruit him, aside from the fact that he's a friend. And of course, the Bad Batch needs a little bit of convincing from Omega. She's the moral compass. She said, look, we got to go and rescue this guy. And we arrive now to the same planet where we started with in the beginning of this episode. And we now know the name of it, which is a planet Darrow, which Tech is able to identify through the scanner, through his database, and they find it. During the daytime, I felt that this planet gives off this crazy vibe from the original Throne Trilogy set of books by Timothy Zahn and his planet of Wayland that he's created, and Mount Tantus. And what the particular planet was in that original set of books is invention of Timothy Zahn, where the Emperor has hid one of his secret bases. This is where his crazy Joros Sabayoth clone is there to protect the Emperor's most important secrets. And when you look at this planet there, you see the forest and you see the mountain and the whole like wide shot of this planet. Like, oh man, it hit all those retro notes. And Dave Filoni and the creative team behind this show, they know the source material so well, and kind of linking the past of Star Wars from the Legends books and now the modern show so seamlessly and so beautifully that I couldn't help but cheer for it. And what completely took my breath away, and I would say this perhaps has instantly become my favorite episode in this entire show, and probably one of my favorite episodes in all of the Star Wars animation, is at the 9 minutes and 30-second mark, when the Bad Batch discovers the facility and they try to gauge where they're getting into, and they're looking through their binoculars and they see those first stormtroopers. The theme of the stormtroopers from episode 4 plays here, and that musical theme is like da 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 da, and I'm not very good at doing this, but anyway, and that particular musical theme is playing throughout the episode, plus the new music that they create, obviously specifically for the show. But once again, it's cementing itself that we are now getting into the original Star Wars trilogy territory here. And this episode just oozes that retro Star Wars look. At times, I couldn't even believe that I'm looking at an animation episode. It felt like I'm back to the 80s when I was growing up with the original Star Wars. And there's another interesting mark at the 11 minutes and 35 seconds where Tech goes in and he slices into this terminal to try to find out their target, the person they were supposed to rescue. And when he's flipping through different data screens, you hear that scan kind of like sound. Also, there's the same sound that R2-D2 makes, or the terminal makes, when he's looking for Princess Leia in the Death Star. And then the Luke is able to say, hey, hold on a second, the princess, she's here. Go back to the episode 4 and check that scene again. And the sounds are actually identical. I just could not believe it. And I feel it was a lot more than just Easter eggs. It was to take this show and very artistically bridge the gap and make a connection to the original Star Wars films. So I found it very enjoyable. Also, when you look at the computer terminal itself, where the Bad Batch are standing next to it and they're strategizing how to get out now, they got to get through the exhaust port and so forth, you see that very same artistic direction. You see the predominantly black wall, and on top of it there's like black, red and blue lights are blinking, and you kind of make a connection to where Luke and Han were stationed when Obi-Wan Kenobi leaves him, and he says to Luke, look, my destiny is not the same as yours, the Force will be with you. Also, very, very similar kind of pieces of technology. Now, again, something that completely struck me as an artist, as somebody who's a huge fan of Ralph McQuarrie, as you guys know, the original concept designer and artist for the Star Wars, who helped George Lucas bring his vision to life. We'll look at the new Stormtrooper uniforms, and one of the Bad Batch teams actually makes a note of it. He says, oh, they're upgrading, they're having new uniforms. When you look at them, particularly their helmets, it looks like the earliest concept art for the Stormtroopers before even the original Star Wars movie was made. And I'll try to find a couple of art pieces of that and throw it on the screen so you guys could make a comparison. I was completely blown away. I was looking at this stuff like, oh my God, that's just another way to say that let's take Ralph McQuarrie unused concepts, or actually some of them were sort of used in Star Wars Rebels show. Also, you see that transitional period of the Empire, and you see how their armor changes there as well. But here, even more so. And you look at those and you say, okay, so the artists took the unused drawings and they said, well, let's implement them now and put them in the show. And it kind of will make sense because as the Empire grows and becomes more efficient and, supplies its army, obviously they would go through iterations of different armor pieces. And interestingly enough, the regular Stormtroopers contrast very well from those elite ones, which look a lot like the Republic Commander, especially their cross guard pieces where you see their bluish kind of eyes and visor over here. It reminded me of something also from Star Wars Legends, where when the Bad Batch tries to fight them, and when a hunter has a hand-to-hand combat with one of them, I immediately thought, okay, hold on, automatically, these guys are more powerful. Who are they? And without researching much, without going to Wikipedia, I could immediately think of the first phase of the Dark Troopers. And if you know your Star Wars Legends, and if you go read up on this stuff, obviously you see them as completely robotic beings in Mandalorian Season 2, the very same ones that Luke goes and dispatches. That's the latest iteration of Dark Troopers, which become completely machine. Because at one point, the Imperial researchers and scientists believe that the last shortcoming that those models had was the cybernetic or humans implanted with machinery. They said, no, we don't want the human element anymore. We don't want another Darth Vader. We want completely obedient machines. And that's what the Dark Troopers look like in the Mandalorian season finale of Season 2. But here, they're still human. So it's the first phase, perhaps, but they're infinitely more powerful than regular Stormtroopers, and one of them gives Hunter a run for his money. So I thought that was quite interesting. Now we're back to Omega and Wrecker, who are left behind with the ship because they're supposed to be the cavalry, the backup. And the humor of the show is very much still there, and I enjoyed the line by Wrecker. He goes like, hey, I'm charging up before I charge in. So it was kind of a funny moment. And after the battle begins, something that I've predicted in my previous reviews happens here. Omega is now settling into one of her potential roles as a getaway driver. She had a little exchange with Hera Syndulla in the previous episodes where they both spoke about flying, and that's something that Omega possibly would be interested in later. And now here we see, obviously, the Bad Batch has been teaching her how to fly, and she's able to do that. And until the moment where Tech takes over and he said, no, I'll take it over from here, she's able to pilot quite efficiently. And I also loved seeing how, even in this episode, she isn't just thrown to the side, but she's given a lesser role, and we're back to the Batch now. She still does her part in it. Again, very enjoyable, very balanced writing in the show. Everybody is highlighted. Everybody has their moment in the show, I would say, particularly in every episode. And what we end up in this episode, where all the action breaks loose, we have an absolutely stunning aerial battle, which is paralleled by the ground combat in the facility, in the base, when the Bad Batch is trying to get out. There's beautiful shootout there. Excellent sky battle, and we see the Wrecker sitting behind the turret, and he's picking off those Imperial fighters. Very, very enjoyable stuff. It was just felt so tense. And the music was there. And once again, just looking at that landscape, and for me personally, thinking of the Wayland planet, which I have a huge nostalgic feelings for from the Throne books, it just brought it all together. Plus those sound effects and that Stormtrooper musical cue, it just brought it home. And I felt like I'm watching the original Star Wars trilogy again. It was just completely beautiful feeling. And the show is very quickly becoming my absolute favorite of all Star Wars show. And where do we end up in this episode? Hunter's fall. We all spoke how he's clearly inspired by John Rambo, played by Sylvester Stallone in his original film, with his red bandana, and he's rocking a knife, a military knife. Obvious connection to the popular cinematic hero. And here, it's almost a homage to the original First Blood film, where John Rambo falls from the mountain and he falls through these like trees, and he's able to break his fall and still drops to the ground. Same happens to Hunter, and I don't think it was incidental at all. It's the creators of the show saying, "Hey, look, we're big fans of the John Rambo, and this is what we see here." And it was such an epic and cinematic moment where he commands his friends. He says, "Look, this is an order. Leave me. You won't be able to come and pick me up. I command you. I order you to leave." So that's what the Bad Batch does. And he's standing there by himself, and all these stormtroopers come and surround him. And he's not even willing to fight them because that's not a battle he could win. And frankly, if this were the last episode of this season, I wouldn't mind it, because it's a cliffhanger ending, but at the same time, there's some kind of like an encouragement to keep watching and being excited for season 2, because the very last shot of this episode is Hunter in his prison cell, and who sees him there is the Crosshairs. Like, "Oh, I was hoping that I would capture all of you, but it's just you," which we understand that Crosshair is at this point nowhere near returning or being a good guy, and we honestly don't know if that chip is still motivating him, or if something else there, that maybe the Bad Batch, his personal feelings of following orders and being a good soldier, go beyond just the chip programming, and if it's some ideological difference that he had with the Bad Batch, and he felt betrayed by them personally, that they didn't follow where he wanted to go. Anyway, guys, I thought it was a fantastic episode, and all those small little artistic moments and cues felt a lot more than Easter eggs to me. They felt like Dave Filoni once again has proven that he knows this material inside out, and he knows where the show is going narratively, obviously trying to connect with the era that we know from original Star Wars films, and he's doing it in slow, deliberate way, which I very much appreciate. He's not rushing into things. He's not barraging us with different cameras like, "Oh, look, a character here, or a character there." He's doing it as a master storyteller, and I really appreciated that. I would love to hear what you guys thought about this episode. Drop a comment below. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you caught that musical cue as well, because I would be curious to hear if I was the only one who was there. I'm pretty sure most of you know your Star Wars music, and you probably caught it as well. Anyway, my name is Benjamin. As I mentioned earlier in this video, I do Star Wars comic book and book reviews, character highlights, lore videos. I have a podcast and so forth. Please consider subscribing to my channel. I would really appreciate your support, and I'll see you next time.